Welcome to the very first episode of The Comeback. We have our friend Samrat and I'm Ash. We came up with the name very randomly. We think it is appropriate name. I don't know what you all views are, but we are going to be talking in more of like themes of where we have seen the eternal bodies, or we can call them God, or uh, in the messenger, whatever people would like to frame it as. Uh, they do come back, and we are we have we are in that point right now where we see some signals, and there may already be some beings that we have just not been able to recognize whether they truly are the messenger, or the gods themselves. So here, with that in the setting, so started this we are starting this actually, and we both are impromptu guys. We have not done any kind of preparation. We both are not experts in this, although we have read a lot. Um, but I think it is a way that we can start talking about religion as a philosophy, and we both have done extensive reading for past couple of years. Um, and Since we are doing this in English, and we will be talking about Bhagavad Gita, which is a Hindu scripture, we just wanted to have a little bit background so that people who have never heard of Bhagavad Gita, or even Hinduism, they will at least have some sort of background of what we are talking about. So with that in mind, again, the stress point is we will be talking religion as a philosophy, and Bhagavad Gita itself we see as a philosophy. Samrat, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean that's a great point to start because in the contemporary world, religion and philosophy seem to have been divorced from each other, but that wasn't always the case. I mean, philosophy, theology, religion, call it by whatever name you will, they always went hand in hand, and that's why we see in the ancient tradition, whether it's in India or Greece or China or many other parts of the world, religion and theology and philosophy were almost synonymous in some way, of course, with some minor differences. But that being said, we are starting with Gita because that is something we understand well and it's very close to our cultural understanding. So it's the Bhagavad Gita, right? The literal translation is the song of the Lord. Geet or Gita meaning song or music, and Bhagavad comes from the word Bhagwan, which also means God or the Lord, the Supreme Lord. So it literally translates to the song of the Lord because it is written in a in not as a prose but as a poetry. It's a poem. It's one of the
Yes.
poems. But the setting is very interesting because it's a poem that's been narrated on the battlefield. And
Right.
we'll get into the specifics of what this battlefield is. I mean, both the literal and the metaphorical battlefield that we all have in our lives. So, Ash, do you wanna talk about what
Yeah.
the
So
setting
so
is?
yeah. No, yeah. Let's talk about the battlefield, right? So
Yeah.
when actually Bhagavad Gita is actually a part of broader text. It is called Mahabharata,
Mm.
and Bhagavad Gita really begins at the battlefield when the two cousins are at the battlefield to fight for a piece of property that it appears, but also it's also a battle of dharma, the eternal dharma, which um, there is no real literal English translation for the word dharma, but we will try to define it as closely as we progress in in this series. Um, but the setting is that this is the battlefield, two cousins, and both are very powerful warriors, the best of the best on both sides.
Trained
They
by
are
the
at the
same guru,
battlefield.
sorry, trained by the same
Yeah,
person, same guru.
exactly. Yeah, trained by the same guru, and both are same family actually,
Yeah,
and
first
they
cousins.
both yeah, exactly. And then so the dilemma is very obvious. And that is when Bhagavad Gita starts. So, Samrat, like if you want to talk a little bit more about the the battlefield, like what are these people at the battlefield on both sides? And so one side is Kaurav, and another side is Pandav. But if you want to talk about like who these people are.
So if I was to use some very contemporary language, so Kauravas are the incumbents, the other people in power because they have the kingdom. and their cousins, the Pandavas, are mounting the challenge because they have their own reasons for laying claim to the kingdom of Hastinapura. And these two, as Ash mentioned, are really powerful, perhaps the most powerful warriors of their time. As we said, trained by the same elders, the same gurus, come from the same family. They are first cousins. And the Pandavas are led, or well, advised by Sri Krishna, who is in the battlefield. And one of the Pandavas, the third of the Pandavas, Arjun, who is a master archer, his chariot is being commanded by his good friend Krishna, who he's really a friend up to this point, but we'll see how he transforms into becoming his philosopher and guide, or his teacher. And as they say,
Right.
When the disciple is ready, the master appears. So from being a friend to becoming a master, from being a friend to becoming a philosopher, a guide, that transformation happens literally on the battlefield. So here is Arjun standing there, looking at the armies from across the battlefield, and he sees his own cousins. He sees his own great grandfather, his teachers, many of his in-laws, through his cousins marrying into other families, other kingdoms. Again, very powerful warriors and kings themselves who have decided to side with his cousins, the Kauravas. On his side, of course, he has his allies too. Of course, his brothers and so many other kings and warriors who chose to support the Pandavas. And at that moment, Arjuna is overcome by this deep sense of grief and dilemma. It's a mixed bag of emotions because he's feeling disbelief because he has come to a point where he has to fight his own family, his own cousins. He is anxious. He is feeling a sense of dilemma because he doesn't know what to do. It's his own kith and kin that he has to battle against. And this is no longer a battle of wits or a small skirmish or something like that. This is full-blown war. We are talking like one of the biggest wars of that time. And here he is, totally losing his willpower, his determination to wage battle, to wage war, because he is overcome by the attachment that he has to these same people who have done him wrong for a long time in his life, and him and his brothers.
Right.
And yet he doesn't want to confront that reality. So that is the setting. If you want to add something, I've just tried to describe very briefly.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the major actors here on both sides, right? So when we talk about the major warriors, so Pandav, the good side, you can say in this, the one who is fighting for the righteousness. Pandav are essentially, it's Pandav that really means five. Five means there are five brothers. Yes. So these are three brothers, and then there's like two other brothers from the other mother, which is like the stepbrothers. So total of five brothers, and they are the best of the best for whatever they did at that time. They were the best fighters. And then, so Arjun, who is in dilemma right now, he is the third of the five brothers. Yes. And Arjun is accompanied by Lord Krishna, who Lord Krishna as well as Arjun, they both see mutually as friends. But we will talk more about whether that is just a friendship or there is a lot more to that. And on the other side, Kaurav is the leader of that is Duryodhan. Duryodhan is the cousin of Arjun, and this war we can argue that this entire war is actually being fought because Duryodhan does not want to give even an inch of land to his own cousins. And Duryodhan is the one who has unrighteously occupied Pandava's kingdom. So that is where this full-blown war is coming from. But Duryodhan is the main guy, and it's really difficult to even describe in words how many powerful fighters Duryodhan has on his side. The first being Bhishma, who is also called Pitama. Pitama simply means the great grandfather, and Duryodhan has him on his side because Bhishma Pitama, he's actually tied to his kingdom. He he sees anyone who is trying to attack his kingdom, righteously or unrighteously, he's trying to protect his kingdom. And because Duryodhan is leading the kingdom, Bhishma is just tied to fight against his own other side of the family.
Right.
And then the Bhishma and then Kaurav also have Dronacharya that Samrat was mentioning. Dronacharya is the teacher for both sides of the fighters. And he has trained Arjun, he has trained Duryodhan, he has also trained all other five brothers. And Duryodhan, they're actually 100 brothers, and they're all trained by Dronacharya. And look at the irony here. Dronacharya's favorite disciple, or the warrior, or the student you can call, is actually Arjun, and Arjun is actually his opponent at this battlefield. And then we have many others, and we will talk about a lot more of these characters. Samrat, just you might want to mention if I'm missing some very, very big ones here at this opening scene.
Just the main brothers in question. Bhim, who is elder to Arjun, the second Pandava, he is a master at using the mace. And then there's Yudhishthir, who's the eldest Pandava, arguably the eldest Pandava, and that's another thing we will discuss as we go along. But for now, the eldest Pandava, Yudhishthir, he is good with the javelin, like something like a javelin, like a spear. It's a spear. And the other two, the half brothers, Nakul and Sahadev, I believe they're good with like being doctors or something, because they have that role of being healers. So they have that healing potential also on their side for their own warriors. And then, of course, you mentioned Dronacharya, you mentioned...
They're also very good fighters in sword and archery overall as well. Sword and also spear, they both have mastered that.
But Arjun is by far the best archer in the land.
Of course, yeah.
And you have Dronacharya, who's the royal teacher for both these sets of cousins. There's Bhishma Pitama, who's like the grandsire of the Kuru family. You have Kripacharya, who's another teacher, and taught both sides. You have Ashwathama, Dronacharya's son, a very powerful warrior with some immensely big boons by his side granted to him by the gods. So there's Jayadratha on the side of the Kauravas. So a lot of names, and I'm sure as we go on discussing...
So the summary would be like, the most powerful names are actually with Kaurav, the bad guys, if you really think, right? Because they have the historically they were more aligned, and also most of the people who are fighting with them, they belonged to that kingdom. So they all see the attack by Pandava at the battlefield as defending their own kingdom. And of course they don't want to fight their own people. And we will see how this dilemma really transforms. But there is one character that I would like to mention here, that Samrat talked about, arguably Yudhishthir, which is the eldest of the Pandav. But there is actually a mysterious scene here, that there's the other Pandav who is not a part of this five Pandav, but there was another sixth guy who was the eldest one, is actually with the bad guys in this case, Kaurav, and he is the best friend of Duryodhan, the main leader. And in Mahabharata, Duryodhan has done favor to Karna. So Karna is obligated to fight for his best friend's kingdom. Yes. But Karna is also one of Arjun on one side, on the Pandav side, and Karna on the Kaurav side. They both are the best of the best fighters in archery, and they both were equally good. Arguably, Karna has more weapons than perhaps Arjun has. But it's tricky to define what the weapon is, because Arjun actually has Lord Krishna with him, in addition to all the weapons, right?
Yeah, and also there is a theme in the Mahabharata, which is of course prior to the Gita, which is the continuous rivalry between Karna and Arjun. And they both, I mean, Arjun, of course, is the declared master archer of his time, but Karan feels that he's equally as good as Arjun. And since we've already said that he is the sixth Pandava, or rather, he's the eldest Pandava, he was actually disowned or at his birth by his own mother, because she didn't want to have a child then. And so he was disowned and deserted. And he grew up in very different circumstances. But then, as Ash mentioned, he was he found Duryodhan's friendship, who basically did a lot of favors for him, made him the king of a minor kingdom. And so he is obligated to fight alongside Duryodhan against his own brothers, his own siblings, not just, they aren't his cousins or anything, they are his own siblings. And he finds this out just prior to the war, in very different, or I would say very tragic circumstances. But that's not really the part of our conversation. So yes, we laid out the actors on the battle.
Yeah. So let's talk about a little bit application of this particular battlefield and the makeup of these warriors.
Yeah.
So both sides, as we talked about, Pandavas, fewer people, fewer weapons and ammunitions, but they are going to fight for the right cause. And because they're going to fight for the right cause, Lord Krishna is actually on their side, and Lord Krishna has taken sort of determination that he is not going to fight in the war. He is not going to use his weapons. He will be there as more of like a guide for Lord
Basically.
Krishna, right, Samrat?
Yeah. He's more like an advisor, because he doesn't want to partake in this battle between these two families. And he says,
Right.
"Look, I'm not going to pick up my weapons. It's not my fight. It's for you to fight and figure out, who's on the right side of things, and who deserves
Yeah.
it."
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about this, because if you look at the righteousness side,
Yeah.
they lack a lot of the powerful things that you need to go in a war. As opposed to the opponent, the bad guys, they outnumber in everything. I mean, they have more people, more to fight. They have more resources to fight.
Yeah.
They have more arms and ammunitions. They are well equipped to fight, and that's why Duryodhan firmly believes that he can actually fight and win the war, even though he knows that Pandavas are the best fighters. But because he has, and he talks in the opening scene, that he has the best of the best fighters in the world at that time. How would Pandavas be able to win this war? And don't you think we face that situation even in modern times? I think the good guys are always trashed, talked bad about, always taken their rights away, property away, and they always have this insurmountable challenge of dealing with like powerful forces, powerful money, powerful interest.
Yeah.
And still, we complain about this every day. But if you look at this particular battle scene, right, then imagine the burden that the Pandava have in order to win this. They could very well lose, as Lord Krishna says.
Yeah.
But still, it is in their best. This is in their righteousness, dharma. He says he has to fight the war, right?
Yeah, it's their conviction. It's their conviction that they are waging a just war, waging a just battle, and that is why they feel more confident, even in the face of such uh, enormous challenges. Because just as their side has some of the best fighters of the time, the opposing camp has people who they looked up to. So there's also that trauma, because these are the people who they admire, and they know they're not on their side. So you already have some sort of a burden of um, I don't know how to say this, but they they perhaps feel that the elders who they grew up observing and emulating have deserted them. So there's already that pressure.
Right.
In addition to the fact that the Kaurava side has more resources, they have a larger army, they have more kings and people supporting them. And as you said, Duryodhan makes it very clear at the very beginning of the war. At least that's the way they show in the television adaptations, or in most written form of the Gita, that Duryodhan is doing this big dance off, and he's kind of showing his own chops, like, hey, this is who I got, and I have all these people on my side. Um, it's almost like he's trying to play a psychological tactic, psychological move on them. That look, these are
Right.
all people, and he's trying, he's really trying for them to just give in and just not wage war. Maybe also because he feels that he's not on the right side and he doesn't want to actually start the battle. That's just one interpretation that I have. That he's just trying to scare them to stop fighting or start the war itself. But there are very different interpretations of it, of course.
Yeah, but this is heavily applicable to our life in our lives every day, right? Because if you look at business to politics to our personal lives, I see this every day. Like the good guys are always treated very miserably, and
they're always
it looks like the bad guys are always winning.
Yeah,
the bad guys always have more resources. They're always more powerful, always more money, always have more people with them. I mean, they do the real damage, what we can see even in this battlefield, before even coming to the battlefield, the bad guys did all sort of damage. The Pandavas were exiled from the kingdom, and then they were target for mass killing several times, and they were alive purely because of a lot of luck, and also maybe because Lord Krishna was on their side, and also maybe some good deeds that they had done, or their parents had done, or their ancestors had done, right? So this is like very relevant, and I feel this like very touching, because we this and also very inspirational, because when we face these kind of challenges in our life every day, I think we should reflect upon the opening of Bhagavad Gita and see, like, if you were Arjun, or if you were one of the Pandavas, and then you see this massive army of Kaurav against you, like, what would you feel? Like, would you run away from the battlefield, or would you just surrender? What would you do? Because that's a very difficult spot to be in, and we deal with situations like this every day.
Oh yeah, we do. Yes, because the vices and the negative and the bad things always outnumber the good, the virtuous, and the right. Yeah, I mean, just to think about what I would feel if I was on that battlefield as Arjuna, or in his place, I would be totally shaken, because you see this, you see that everything is stacked up against you, and that's what you have every day, right? Like as you mentioned, in your personal, professional, or social, in politics, everywhere, you see that things are stacked up totally against you. And yet there is that conviction. Well, you may have your doubts at times that, oh, what if I fail? What if I lose this battle? But there is some amount of conviction within you, or there is uh, that moral force that guides you. It may be internal, it may be external. But it's always there.
Yeah, so let's continue talking about this, because this is the great opening scene, and we will try to give a lot more context, especially for people like we mentioned earlier who are not familiar with this. And we will continue to. We will see you again in the next episode of this series of the Great Comeback. And thank you so much for tuning in. Samrat and I will be here in the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys soon.